Welcome to WeLearn, Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 17th of the subject The Study of Society, and the chapter is State and Traditional Societies. Let's see the topics to be covered. Traditional societies as political systems, the nature and scope of political authority, the basis of legitimacy of political authority, and institutions to prevent abuse of authority. Traditional societies as political systems. In contrast to modern democratic and totalitarian states on the one hand and the primitive stateless societies on the other, we have the whole range of pre-modern societies with political traditions which have shaped the political thought and issues of modern times. So pre-modern societies with political traditions with modern approach. The nature and scope of political authority, taking the wide range of societies as we have done within the category of traditional or pre-modern, it is natural that the nature and scope of political authority in them will vary to a large extent. The fact of centralization of political authority is always a matter of concern. The central authority, chief authority as a titular head. By acknowledging a more centralized concentration of power to a chief, a tribal group may achieve greater productivity without changing its technology. Surajit Sinha, an anthropologist, holds that the chiefdom is a development of the tribal system to a higher level of integration. Secular authority endowed with sacredness. In Surajit Sinha's words, the Rajas not only ruled over their kingdoms on behalf of the presiding deities of their lineages, they imbibed in their social being the sacredness of the deity. Myths of divine origin of ruling families justify the ruler's claim to exercise political authority. So basically, myths of divine origin of rural families, they claim they also have political authority with them. Necessity of acquiring a king. The secular authority is ceremonially ritualized in order to raise its status above the ordinary people. In some cases, the need to acquire a king of the appropriate status is so strong that persons of royal origin are stolen and reared to become rulers. Mahapatra has shown that small-scale polities in ex-princely states of Orissa felt so insecure in the face of pressures from larger kingdoms that they were compelled to sponsor kingship. Territory and demography in relation to the range of political authority. Both the territory and people are basic components of the nature of political authority. The area in which the residents acknowledge the power of a king defines the range of his political authority. So basically, the area in which the residents acknowledge the power of a king defines the range of his political authority. The territorial aspect of a chief's power demarcates geographical limits of his administrative and judicial measures. So the territory and people are the basic components of any political authority, and the territorial aspect of any chief's power basically demarcates or divides the geographical or the physical limits of his administrative and the judicial powers and measures. Economy and centralization of a polity. Research findings on tribal politics and state systems in India point to an important link between the level of surplus growth and development of a centralized polity. Amalendu Guha writes, in India, it was the use of the cattle-driven plug that ensured a relatively large surplus and therefore also a higher form of political organization. Scope of political authority. The extent to which a ruler exercises his authority over his people defines the scope of his political power. It's actually the scope rather than range of power that makes a polity more or less centralized. In order to find the scope of a central authority, it's necessary to find what aspects of the people's lives are controlled by the political power. So, if the individuals are free to resort to force or violence, it is a clear indication of the minimal scope of the central authority. So it depends basically that how much the ruler is able to exercise political power over his subjects or over his people. If the people can freely resort to violence or other forces, then it is a clear indication that the authority of the king or the authority of the ruler is minimal. It means the ruler or the king does not have that much authority over the people. Patrimonial authority. Scope of a centralized authority can also be discussed in terms of it being diffuse. In many polities, the ruler's authority is quite diffuse, covering most aspects of his subjects' lives. Max Weber has described this form of authority as patrimonial, which means that the scope of this kind of authority is not clearly specified. Rather, it subsumes all kinds of protective measures and cares of his people by the ruler. So basically, the authority, the means, the scope, that is not clear, that is not specified. The ruler considers his subjects as his children and protects them. In patrimonial authority, the ruler considers his subjects or his people as his children, and it is his moral duty to protect them from any damage or from any harm. Mahapatra remarks, The Patrani or senior most queen was held in the highest affection and solicitousness by the tribal people as their mother, and she looked upon the tribesmen as her children. Sometimes, even in modern context, vestiges of these expectations are found on the part of both the ruler and the ruled. So, ruled people, they also feel that whoever is ruling them, that is like their father or the mother. Delegation and distribution of authority. In polities with wider scope of authority of the ruler, we also notice the mechanism of delegation of authority. The ruler may seem to possess absolute power, but he distributes it among others. The system gives us a pyramidal formation of authority, that is, the king on the top and successive grades of subordinate officials below. Each person in the official hierarchy functions under the authority above him. So basically, the king delegates his authority to the people whom he can trust, and there is a hierarchical level, a pyramidal formation of authority which is formed. Delegation of authority among the relatives of the ruler. R.K. Saha reports that the office bearers were recruited at all three levels of prestigious posts from the genealogically senior most persons. In such political systems, governing becomes a kind of family affair. From Africa, we can give the example of some southern Bantu states such as the Swazi, which follow this pattern. So basically, the king delegated his authority among the relatives. Delegation of authority among loyal subjects. In many states, relatives of the ruler are considered as rivals and therefore not trustworthy. They cannot be invited to share the ruler's authority lest they conspire and usurp all of it. The distribution of power is then among the trusted and loyal friends. Great value is placed on one's personal loyalty to the ruler. The loyalty is rewarded by the king in the form of a share in his authority. So basically, the relatives who are not found to be trustworthy, among them the king does not delegate his authority. Rather, the delegation of authority is done to the among some loyal and trusted friends they are loyal. Then the king rewards them by giving them a share in his authority. Delegation of authority is a balance of forces. The power of the central authority is reinforced by the institutions of hereditary succession to kinship, distribution of power to kinsmen, and supernatural sanctions of king status. Once the power is distributed between the central authority and regional chiefs, the balance mechanism begins to operate. So once the power is basically distributed between the central authority and regional chiefs and other people, so the balance mechanism, the other modes of power begin to function and begin to operate. If a ruler becomes autocratic in his ways, subordinate chiefs may secede. So if a ruler becomes authoritarian in his approach, then the chiefs or the subordinate people may not like it. The basis of legitimacy of political authority. States endogenously come into being as a result of evolutionary process from within without outside influences. These are sometimes also called primary states. Exogenous state systems are built by conquests, or their particular formations are affected by systems from earlier periods or from outside their own territories. Legitimacy in primary states. A state based on endogenous evolutionary process reflects a kind of homogeneity in society which is found to be lacking in states of a conquest type. The process of state formation among the Meitei of Manipur state, described by R.K. Saha, seems to be the result of inter-clan feuds within the tribal groups in Manipur Valley. The basis of legitimacy of power in a primary state is rooted in its indigenous traditions. Political relations in such a society are perceived in terms of a common structural principle. Legitimacy in conquest type. The conquest type, also known as secondary state, emerges after smaller political units are conquered by more powerful people. The conquest may be in the form of an actual warfare. Invariably, non-indigenous political institutions are superimposed on conquered groups. In most cases, kinship-based community relationships of the peasant groups come in sharp contrast to the feudal-type political relations which are associated with a foreign government. Legitimacy derived from myths. All political systems have stories about their origin. Such myths basically reflect the attitudes and values of the society. Stories about the genesis of the system of political authority can be considered as its mythical charter. Myths show the divine origin of the ruling line. The effect of such myth is to legitimize the existing political authority. So there are a lot of myths associated with state's legitimacy. There are a lot of stories originating from the genesis of the system of the political authority, its mythical character, and also its ruling line. Legitimacy derived from myths. In a closed system of stratification such as a caste system, the political role of priests required religious validation. In India, the law books were created by the priestly class, and law in India has always maintained a religious base. Not only this, as Surajit Sinha observes, the ideology of caste system, more than any other feature of Indian society, provided a broad frame of state formation in the tribal regions. So basically, in a closed system of stratification, basically political role of priest, the role of anybody, the political role also required religious validity, religious sanction. So priestly class and law in India has always maintained a religious base. Grounds on which people accept authority. So what are the grounds on which people accept authority? Max Weber speaks of three bases upon which the authority can be accepted by people. According to him, there are three types of authority: traditional, charismatic, rational, or legal. So the three types of authority: first is the traditional, which derives from traditional rules, rituals, and basically the regulations. So the traditional modes and the traditional rules and regulations, it derives from there. Charismatic, from the person, from the charisma, from the charm of the person. Rational, legal, from the rationality and from the legality which is imposed on a particular system or which is derived from a particular person or from a system. The last type of authority, which Weber called rational legal, is based on the assumption that people recognize a need of being governed and submitting to a rule of law. Many myths and proverbs in pre-literate societies reflect this attitude of faith in orderly life. In literate societies, usefulness of a government and its machinery is discussed at length in the law books. Institutions to prevent abuse of authority. Maintenance of kingship rests on a constant adherence to its constitutional principles. A king's powers may appear to be absolute, but in practice their various components function through different offices. The cooperation of all these parts enables the king to govern his people. So basically, a king's powers may appear to be absolute. It seems that the king's powers are absolute and they cannot be taken over. But in practice, various components function through different offices, and there has to be cooperation through on all these parts, and there has to be cooperation among these all elements so that king is able to govern the people and to look after their welfare in a proper manner. So when the king is able to look after their welfare and able to govern them in a proper way, then only people can be free and people can be loyal to the king and also to his various parts and various authorities of power. Tendencies towards despotism are checked by well-recognized mechanisms in most traditional societies. The transmission of power from one to the other ruler is either by inheritance according to patrilineal or matrilineal principles of election or popular choice. Ceremonies of oath-taking and exhortations by the councillors to the new king also act as guidelines for proper conduct on the part of the new ruler. So this was basically to escape a tyrannical political authority. The following set of institutions can be activated. The people may decide to migrate to another area outside the jurisdiction of the existing ruler. The paramount ruler may depose his subordinate who has abused the power delegated to him. The king may be made to feel scared of sorcery or assassination by disgruntled people. So it is all about when a king behaves in a tyrannical ways, these steps can be taken by the ruler. These steps can be taken by the ruled or the people who are being ruled. So these are some of the questions you have to do it yourself. How do we define the scope of political authority and define the primary and secondary state? That's all. Thank you. Happy learning. Be learning.